Welcome to this episode of Nature Positivity, the podcast where we chat about all the fun things that happen in the natural world over a cup of tea. I'm Holly.
And I'm Keris, and for this inspiring episode, we're joined by Alicia Hayden, a wildlife artist, writer and filmmaker. She also designed our wonderful Nature Positivity logo, which is absolutely art-dorable in my opinion.
Do you have a cup of tea or hot drink with you, Alicia?
Because it's so warm, I've got a mug of water, so I was gonna make tea, but I thought, you know what, I'm gonna cook. I have a cup of tea on such a hot day, so water it is, I'm afraid.
Do you, Keris?
Yep, I've actually got a hot drink, but I am going to overheat. What about you?
Same.
Hi, I'm Alicia, and thank you so much for having me, both of you. As you said, I'm a wildlife artist and writer and filmmaker, and I'm studying for a Masters in Wildlife Filmmaking. I'm here at UWE in Bristol, and I love trying to explore the natural world through the arts, be that kind of written or visual or kind of more spoken, and I have so much fun trying to experiment with new medias, new techniques, and I hope it inspires people, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it does. It sounds like a really creative life that you have, which is good fun.
I agree.
So when did you start creating art and writing specifically about wildlife?
So I've always been really interested in the natural world. I grew up in North Yorkshire, and both my parents are really interested in nature. So I think I've always sort of been drawn to kind of representing nature in art. That sort of was one of my big focuses. You have the sketches you do when you're tiny, and all of mine are of sort of rainbows and butterflies and things like that. So I think that was always kind of my go-to. And same with writing, really. During lockdown, actually, I found those of writings that I did when I was in school, in primary school, and there's one I wrote about ants and things like that. And actually, I wrote quite a lot about ants, so I'm not sure, I had a bit of a thing about them at one point. But I found one which I did when I was about 9, and I wrote about ants and people coming and destroying their house, and they had to go somewhere else. And so I think it was just one of those things where I was really intrigued by the natural world. We had a garden, I like to explore it, and so it's sort of always, in a way, just because of my parents, because of where we lived, it's always.
I'm the same. I can't really think of a time where I first started becoming really interested in wildlife.
Yeah, definitely.
I definitely relate to the ants bit. I remember getting down on the ground, looking at the ants on the floor in my garden.
I liked kind of invertebrates, and kind of their world is so small for us, but it's huge for them. And I had a camera, and I used to enjoy the macro setting and looking at their world, making it big for me as well. And I think that was probably quite inspirational in my apparent artistic love of ants, which existed when I was younger.
You've also won some awards for photography and art. One of my favourite recent ones is the Hilux piece. Could you tell us a bit about this piece and maybe describe it for anyone listening who hasn't seen it yet?
Yeah, so this piece is a finalist in David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation's Wildlife Artist of the Year this year's. It's in the Human Impact category, which is a category for, I think it's 16 to 22-year-olds who are artists who are trying to create pieces called wildlife artivism, which is the idea of getting a piece that is communicating an issue about science and showing how humans are impacting the environment. So I'm really interested in light pollution, and Hilux is exploring how light pollution, specifically artificial light at night, is affecting moths. Some moths are attracted to street lamps and artificial light sources instead of going to pollinate their flowers, and especially nocturnal flowering plants, they're really suffering because of it. So it's a piece which it's got a black kind of background, and it's got a big yellow orb which is meant to represent this artificial light, and it's got lino-cut moths kind of fluttering into the orb, and some of them are layered on top of each other in all different kind of depths of blackness. And then at the bottom you've got the white nocturnal flowers at the bottom and a few little moths at the bottom, but most of them, as you can see, are kind of drawn into this orb, and there's stars in the background, like flecks of white paint, when you get a brush and you kind of flick it. That kind of style for stars, but it's massively outshone by this big yellow orb. That's kind of what the piece looks like.
I've seen it myself, and go take a look at it if you haven't seen it already, because it's so good.
Yeah, I really like how bright the yellow is against the black background.
Yeah, that was quite fun to do, because I think the yellow the ink I was using, it's quite transparent, and so it was like lots of layers, and I think I used a kitchen sponge and trying to get it to swirl, and yeah, it was a bit of an ordeal getting that yellow to be as bright as it was.
So that's one thing you've been getting up to recently. What else have you been doing?
So at the moment I'm working on like lots of kind of biggish pieces, looking at prehistoric animals and animals which are extinct. So sort of a paleo series. I've just finished a piece on cave hyenas, and I've done some on mammoth and elk. So I'm kind of enjoying those kind of quite big, slightly different pieces, very colourful, trying to bring life to something that we normally just see as skeletons. So that's been fun.
How do you like come up with what you think the animal will look like when we only have skeletons of them?
It depends on the animal. So like often I'll look at what other people have done. So with the hyenas it's a little bit easier actually, because they're obviously, you know, there are already hyenas. So it's a case of kind of looking a little bit at what the cave hyenas look like, which was kind of chunkier from what I can tell, and then looking at normal hyenas and kind of boxing them up a little bit. Whereas with something like a mammoth, that's pretty famous what mammoths look like, and because you've got frozen ones, they're quite easy to do. The most difficult one so far was the Smilodon, which is a kind of saber-tooth, because that's more kind of, they're really stylized in the artwork. So I was looking at a few different reference images. I was looking at like a leopard to see like how they move their muscles, because it's a big cat, and I was looking at like a few other artists' interpretations of the face and the skull. And so sometimes it's really quite straightforward, and sometimes it's a case of using like composite images and kind of piecing them together. Yeah, it depends on the subject specifically, I think. Yeah.
And what's your process for reaching the final piece?
It depends on what I'm doing. So with the wildlife artivism pieces, weirdly with the exception of Hilux, normally I do like mini mock-ups. So with my whale piece, which I did 2 years ago now, I did a mini whale eye first just to see if the style would work. Practiced cross-hatching to see how I could replicate the skin. And then with a piece I've done, also exploring light pollution, called Nightlight, I did a tiny A6 version and experimented with a few things and tried to get the composition right. And then I did a A3 version. With the paleo pieces, I've been going straight into them because I've been trying to make them a little bit more experimental and just messing around with a few different techniques and things. Like with the most recent one, I was drawing with a pipette and also with my fingers, which is why you guys can see that I've got quite colourful fingernails today. It really depends. Sometimes I go straight into things. Like with the paleo pieces, actually, I haven't sketched at all. I've just had a canvas and then just covered it. Whereas with other pieces, I do a pencil sketch. And so it really varies.
Yeah, I couldn't help but notice the wonderful nail colours that you've got. What is it, like red and white?
Yeah, red, pink, a little bit of brown as well, because of the trees I was doing. Had green last week as well, which was quite nice.
Going back to the artivism side of things, have you found that your pieces have resulted in a positive impact?
It's really difficult to tell, because I guess with all of these things you're dealing with quite big issues, but the way I kind of look at it is the reaction I get when I share those pieces, and it's often they get a lot of traction, a lot of interest. A lot of people contact me and say, you know, I didn't know about this, I didn't know this was an issue, and I really like this piece, and they share it, and it creates this sort of positive spiral. It creates this momentum for the piece. So I think for me that makes me feel like it's successful. If that piece goes far enough, it will reach the right people. It will reach the people who do have the power to affect, say, noise pollution in the cities. It will reach the right people who have the power to change how we light our cities and change the bulbs we use to make them moth friendly, for example. So I find it successful if people feel like they've learned about the issue, if they didn't know about it and then they see that piece and then they do, then that's successful, even though it's not changed that specific individual's behaviour, it's changed their way of thinking, and that's just as important.
Yeah, I imagine it's quite thought-provoking for people who see your art or just artivism in general, having not necessarily seen it in the past. It's just a completely different way of experiencing and learning about these species.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
Do you have any pieces that are sort of like, they have multiple interpretations? They could be viewed as being like the negative impact humans are having, or it could be flipped around and shown as the positive changes we can make?
Yeah, I think so. So I think quite a few of the Artivism pieces are like that. Not all of them, but so there's a couple that come to mind. The first is called When the Whale Sang, and it's a biro piece. It's a photographic kind of whale up until kind of halfway down its body, and then it splits into sound waves. And I did it initially because I wanted to depict noise pollution and the idea that this whale is splitting apart, is fragmenting. However, it is quite beautiful. It could actually just be about the whales singing, and some people have just thought it was about whales' song, as in the fact that they sing. And so there is this positive interpretation of that one. And then one of the other pieces I can think of is I did a triptych of, again, light pollution, looking at how it affects dung beetles. So if you read it in one direction, left to right, it's showing how light pollution affects the dung beetles. So it's going from a clear sky with lots of stars visible because they navigate using constellations, particularly the Milky Way. As you progress through the triptych, the end is the dung beetles on its back and the whole sky is yellow and there's no constellation visible, even though I did do it underneath and now I had to cover it with yellow ink, which was really time consuming considering you can't see it. But the dung beetle's actually moving right to left. So if you read it the way that the dung beetle's moving, you're reading it as a story of hope. If we don't put lights where we don't need them, if we don't put them in the middle of deserts where there are no civilizations, and also if we look into ways of, I don't know, having like movement over lights or, you know, sort of imaginative, creative solutions. So I think if you read it from that direction, it is this idea that it's not irreversible. We can change how light pollution is affecting our skies, how it's affecting dung beetles. There is hope if you follow the dung beetle's movement.
I like that. There is hope if you follow the dung beetle.
Quite niche, but maybe we can all follow the dung beetles.
So you've got 2 poetry collection books, the most recent one being Every Dune is a Mountain. What is this all about?
Yeah, it's a poetry collection about sand dunes and exploring them. So it was in partnership with Dynamic Dunescapes and the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust. But I've been creating since last August a series of mini collections which are illustrated poetry books. The overarching theme is to explore your local places, explore the natural places in your doorstep and kind of rekindle the love and magic that you have when you go into nature. So the first one was about forests, the second one was about like sunrises and sunsets, the third one was about moorlands. And this is the 4th one, and it's about sand dunes, and it's specifically focusing on Lincolnshire sand dunes, but it obviously applies to sand dunes all over the country, because sand dunes are a really unique and quite different habitat from most other ecosystems, and lots of the wildlife there is only found on sand dunes. So it's a collection that looks at some of the species that live there, and also just looks at the beauty of them. They're quite wild, they're quite mountainous, which is kind of what gave the name to the collection, and I had a lot of fun trying to think of poems, think of ways of exploring the dunes through writing and through illustration, just because they do feel very wild, but then often, you know, they're still extremely beautiful, so yeah.
Would you be able to read us one of your poems?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can read one from Every Dune is a Mountain, which is available for free as well, I should say. Like, you can get a copy for free from my shop. You just have to pay postage if you don't live in Bristol. Normally they're like 4 or 5 poems, but this one's 8. Because it's an actual book rather than a PDF. There's less than 40 copies left, so if you do want one, do it sooner rather than later, because when they're gone, they're gone. Okay. The Northern Dune Tiger Beetle, or Faster, Faster. Umber cases rumbling, rumbling, over pebbles tumbling, tumbling, sharp mandibles grabbing, grabbing, unsuspecting prey scuttling, scuttling, 6 legs kicking, running, faster and faster, pitter and patter, then suddenly stop. Temporary exhaustion, but a fatal error. Take greater precautions to avoid becoming the sand lizard's dinner.
Woo!
I like with that poem as well, like when you actually look at it on a page, like when it's rumbling, rumbling, it goes like from one line to another.
Yeah. You do think when you're making a poetry book, you think a lot about the order of the poems and also how they look on the page. So like using italic, how it fills different lines, and I always think about how they should read like a story.
Do you do all the illustrations?
Yes, yeah. So all of the illustrations for Every Dune is a Mountain are in colour, and all the illustrations are in watercolour, with the exception, I believe, of the middle one, which I think I did as ink and watercolour.
I can't help but noticing as well you have a lot of hairs that you like to draw.
I loved I still do drawing hares. I find their shapes really beautiful, and then it really intrigues and interests me how much they're linked to mythology and kind of magic and creativity, and it's just, there's something that's just really inspiring about them. And Biro as well, it just captures the hair really nicely, the hair of the hares, and I just found them really lovely to write about because they're just so characterful. Like I said, they're all tied up in folklore and stuff, and so yeah, I just think that they're magic, really. That's why there's lots in the collection. You're completely right.
Do you find it easy or hard to write poems? Because for me, if I was to sit down and write, I'd struggle so much.
So it depends. Sometimes they just hit me, like they just come to me and I will just write like several, and it's just because the ideas are coming, and then it's not easy but like it flows. And then other days they're just renowned and if I try to write something and it's not coming naturally, it won't read right, it won't flow properly. So if I do it, then it will take loads of work to get it to go right, and I'll probably end up rewriting. So in general with poems, I tend to wait for the right kind of inspiration, for the right kind of mood and mindset to come on, and then I'm away, really. Yeah, and I think everyone can write, everyone can draw. You just have to find your style and your technique and your media, but everyone can do it. Like, there's no one who can't do it. Creativity is very much for everyone.
So your visual art doesn't just stop with pen and paper, but you're also talented with a camera. Would you like to tell us some of your favourite things to photograph or film?
I love photographing invertebrates and birds. They're kind of my two favourite subjects to do because you can find both of them anywhere. And, you know, you can find so many invertebrates in your garden or just in like a path. You know, there were flying ants just outside my flat the other day. There's just loads around, which is really nice. With macro stuff, it's kind of making things look big, it's exploring this world, it's making it look quite mystical in a way, which I really enjoy. And with birds, it's a case of finding action, creating movement, showing their behaviour. With film, I don't know, I think my current film, which is sort of, I suppose, all I can think about at the moment with regards to film, is about a Zimbabwean wildlife artist called Titch. And it's looking at how he was working towards his first solo exhibition in Zimbabwe. And he really loves elephants, so he's creating a new piece looking at elephants, which he's painting in the bush. And that's the kind of film I'm really enjoying creating because I feel like it's combining my interests, it's creative, it's combining wildlife, it's combining this Titch who is so phenomenally talented, and yet so many people don't know about his work, and yet he's having a really important effect in his community, especially with children, like inspiring them and making them want to take up art, making them want to conserve wildlife, and making them realise what they have in their local areas. So it's a story I felt really passionate about telling, just because it's important. You know, he's doing such phenomenal work, he's not getting recognition for it, and he loves wildlife art so much, and that's so inspiring. So I think I quite like creating films which feel like they're combining creativity, they're combining this sort of magic, this love for the natural world. It's where someone really loves something and you just want to show it on screen because it's beautiful to watch someone explore something they're passionate about.
I definitely agree that, like, when you actually just stop and look at the world around us, it is definitely magical.
And I love that combining two creative industries, so the art and film, you're creating a film about art, all with the theme of conservation and wildlife. I think that's just amazing.
Yeah, it's the thing I wanted to do most with my film, was combine what I was interested in. I mean, it's why I'm interested in wildlife film, because I like the fact it combines writing and being creative and wildlife and art and cameras. It combines all the things I love, and so that's why I was drawn into the industry, is why I sort of decided I wanted to go into it. And so, you know, we could make our films on whatever we wanted, and so it felt like such a logical choice. Yeah.
Will we be able to see the film when it's done? When and where can we watch it?
Yes, you will. So there will be a screening in Bristol around October, November time, which will have all of the MA films in. Mine might be available on an online screening before then with David Tepper Wildlife Foundation. But then, more broadly, it will be available in 2023 on my social media, on my YouTube channel. It will be available to watch, stream online.
Are you deep in the editing stages now?
Yeah, I mean, I literally, so I have two screens, and my monitor is literally, I've been staring at a frame from the film for this entire thing. So yes, very much deep in the edit. It's technically ongoing. Editing is sort of tricky because it's quite overwhelming, having so much stuff and then sort of pulling it together to make a sort of coherent story. That's difficult. It's quite sort of overwhelming at points because you're trying to do justice to something that you care about as well.
I suppose it's kind of like your art, you just have to play around with it and see what goes where, almost.
Yeah, it's playing around with it, it's getting into the zone, and then it's, you do one thing and you think, okay, and then you come back to it and you're like, no, and you completely redo it. So, yeah, it's very much just like art, you're right.
You mentioned that you're doing a master's, and that's why you're doing the film. Could you tell us a bit more about what the master's is, and what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm doing a master's in wildlife filmmaking, which is at the University of West of England in Bristol. It's a master's which teaches you how to use film cameras, and so the technical kind of aspect of filmmaking, as well as the editorial aspects and the logistical sides of filmmaking. So you kind of learn all aspects of working in the wildlife film industry. You learn about every single job, and you combine all of those to produce your own films. You have to do all the paperwork, you're doing all of the planning, all of the prep, you do all the filming, and then you do all the editing. And then you do all the advertising. So you're doing all of the jobs for one film, which is 12 minutes in length. And it's such a cool master's. I really enjoy it. And I'd recommend anyone who wants to go into wildlife film applying for it, because you learn so much and it's so much fun.
Sounds like it. So with your filmmaking, do you use a camera or a phone, or have you used both? Do you have any tips for people wanting to go out and do filmmaking themselves, but maybe they don't have the equipment for it, but they have a phone?
Yeah, absolutely. So before the masters, I was just using, I had a stills camera, and it's not a film camera, but it was okay, and it's pretty good actually. Like, you just play around with it and see what it comes up with. And for anyone who's interested, I just recommend practicing with whatever you have. Phones these days are just as good as loads of cameras actually. If you want to get into presenting, you can film yourself, and that's really easy with a phone. Just find something you want to talk about and start talking. If you want to go into camera, or if you just want to kind of practice filming, find something just in your local area. The first things I did were just with no narration. It was just pictures, really. But it was trying to tell a story. Like, there was a tawny owl family near my house, and I went out and I found the parents, and then I found the babies, and I just made a little film about this is the parent owl, this is the babies that are brunching. And there's no audio, it's just them screeching.
Nice.
And that was just done on a stills camera with a little tripod, because it was quite wobbly if I'd done it handheld. I think just get out there. I think it's one of those things where your first film won't be perfect. You'll look back at them and you'll think, oh, I know. But at the time you'll think, oh, this is okay. And it's like you improve so much, and it's nice to have something to look back on, and it's just starting somewhere and building up the confidence and the experience, and just getting some skills. Like, using stills cameras is completely different from using film cameras. Like, I learned so much transitioning onto film cameras, but it's a start, and it's an important start, and it shows you're interested in it, and it helps build your confidence, and it lets you explore. When you're doing film and stuff, you think about the natural world in a different way, and you're looking at it in a different way, is perhaps a better way of saying that. Because you're focusing on things, you're looking at light, and you're looking at behaviour, and you're looking at it in a different way, you're paying attention in a different way. I pay attention so much more to sounds.
Yeah, it sounds like it would kind of almost force you to stop and not just go on the mission that you're on to try and get to where you're trying to go. Stop and pay attention. Even if you've not got a camera or phone with you, you're probably going to be more aware of what you could be filming or just looking at.
Absolutely. I think it's always the case as well, as when you don't have your camera or your phone with you. That's when you see it,
Yeah.
Where
do you sort of find inspiration for new art pieces or series or poetry?
That's a good question. It really depends. So, I don't know, often with poetry, I tend to come up with ideas when I'm walking in nature, or if I'm just doing something a bit. I used to get the bus a lot, and I used to think of stuff on the bus, because it's your mind is kind of switched off a little bit. And so things like that are quite good for poetry, because my mind is just kind of having a little wander within itself, I think. And that's why I often get them when I'm walking, and then often they're influenced by nature, because it's what I'm smelling, it's what I'm seeing, it's what I'm hearing. With art pieces, it really varies. Sometimes they're commissions, so it's sort of I want something like this, and then I kind of go off on a tangent. Sometimes it's so, I don't know, sometimes it's just kind of what I feel like. The first paleo piece, I wanted to do those colours. I wanted to do pink and yellow. And just in my head, I knew it would work I wanted it to be a saber-toothed tiger. So sometimes it's just I don't know, a gut feeling. And sometimes it's like with the wildlife artivism, it's normally because I've read something and I want to communicate it, or I feel strongly about something and I want to reflect that. So with all of the light pollution pieces, it was a case of, I feel strongly about this. I want other people to see that this is an issue. I want other people to care about this as well. And so trying to think about how to reflect that. And sometimes that's the case with poems as well. So sometimes it's really spontaneous and sometimes it's planning. And the best ideas actually, well, I've only had it happen twice, but I had some ideas which came to me in my sleep and I woke up and I had an idea and I was like, oh, that's great.
Subconscious is working away.
Yeah. Dream Alicia was having a great time when she came up with those ideas, but but in general, I don't know, they just sort of come to me like when I'm just kind of, sometimes I try and force myself to be creative, but that never really works. So I think it's sort of coming organically is the best thing.
Do you find that just like simply spending time in nature helps with that as well?
Oh my god, definitely. Nature is like endlessly inspiring. Like I always come back if I'm feeling sort of burnt out, or like I'm looking at a piece and thinking I don't think this looks right, and then if I go and spend time in nature, which I do every day, and I instantly feel kind of, it's like filling up a well, like you just feel more creative, you do, once after you spend time in nature. Besides,
I totally relate to that. And also the sleeping thing. I wake up and have the best ideas.
It's great, isn't it? It makes you feel like you've had a productive sleep.
Yeah. Do you have a favourite art piece so far?
Oh man.
That's a big question.
Yeah, oh man, I don't know. I think I have different favourites within different categories because so many of the pieces are different, and because they're in different media and different styles. Like I love this piece called Nightlight, which I mentioned earlier, which is looking at birds and light pollution. It spent so long in my brain trying to become an idea, and then I really liked how it turned out, just because it was a bit different. It's quite kind of cubic, almost like cubism, like sort of layering things and shapes and stuff. I mean, I really like the piece I've just finished. I've just finished it though, so it's new, so I think there's also that level of like, I was working on it for a week and so I feel quite attached to it. I don't know, there are pieces like I did a crane piece a few months ago and I really like that because it's huge. It's the biggest piece I've ever done, and again it was just playing around with a few different things, adding water to the inks and stuff, and it really varies. I don't think I have one piece. Like I'm literally looking around my room like looking at some of the artwork, so I'm like, I like that piece, but I don't know, is it my favourite? I don't think I have just one. I think as well because I play around with different media, so you can't really compare. There's a piece I'm looking at which is a baboon I did, and it's all in white gel pen, and I can't compare that to any of the other pieces because that's like, I haven't done many in that, and I really like it. Yeah, I don't know, I think I'd really struggle.
It's like asking you to pick your favourite child or something.
Understandable.
Yes, very much so.
Do you have any advice for people that are wanting to do more creative things?
The simplest thing is to say just do it, but I guess that can be a little bit intimidating. But like everyone can be creative, so I think it's just a case of finding what it is you want to do. If you want to write, then get a pen, work out what it is you want to write about. It can be something super simple, it can be something, you could write about a pen pot, I don't know, like that's very much literally what's in front of me, but you can write about something that's really mundane and just find a way to make it interesting. Play around with words, play around with punctuation, play around with how it looks on the page, and just find your flow. Keep writing until you make something that you think, hey, this is okay, because you will. And it won't be the first thing you write, and it may not even be like the 10th thing or the 100th thing you write, but you'll get there, and with every single thing you write you'll improve. And it's the same with art, like you can do little doodles and that's art, and you can do cartoons and that's art. And it's a case of finding what you like to draw, how you like to draw it. Do you want it to be accurate? Do you want it to be stylised? Do you want it to be colourful? Like, I think with art, it used to really bother me because I was doing all of this work in biro and I felt like I didn't have a style because everything was really photographic, everything was in biro. I don't know, it really bothered me. I didn't think I had a style, and in many ways I don't have a style. Lots of what I create is really different from other things, but at the same time I do have a style because everything is quite clearly mine. Even when I try and hide that, it is definitely me who's made that work, and I like the fact that I can play around with different medias and it still is mine, and I like the fact that I've got that flexibility. So I think it's, honestly, with all of the arts, it's having fun. Like, there's no judgment, you can do whatever you want. There's literally, the sky is the limit. And that's really exciting to me, and I think it should excite other people because it excites me for them.
And don't forget, the best ideas come when you wake up in the morning.
100%, yeah. If you sleep lots, you come up with lots of good ideas.
Yep. But if you sleep too much, you can't actually get any work done.
It's the balance between, sleeping so much that you lose your day and sleeping so much that you get some really good ideas.
So here on Nature Positivity, we like to end our episodes with our nature highlights of the week. Alicia, let's hear yours. Do you have a nature highlight of the week?
My most recent nature highlight then was I was in Wales with the BTO for one of their bird camps, and we saw a phenomenal amount of wildlife. So I suppose the most exciting thing was an alpine swift, which I'd never heard of, but it's a national rarity. They don't come here very often. And it flew a couple of metres over our heads, and they're the size of a hobby, and it's a bird of prey. They've got white underbelly, and they're beautiful and really fast. And so that was very, very cool. And I just didn't know what it was at the time, and everyone was like, whoa, and I was like, oh no, this is important. So that's probably a highlight, combined with everyone's reactions, which were really lovely.
What about you, Holly? What's yours?
Mine is a nature find.
Oh.
I don't actually remember if I've found one before, but I've definitely been with someone who's found this thing, but they found it, so I couldn't take ownership of it.
Mystery.
Maybe I could give you a chance to guess what I found.
Oh. Is it an insect?
No.
Is it a bird?
No, so it's something that I could take home with me.
Is it a nest?
No, but close.
Oh! Is it some sort of feather?
It is.
Is it a jay feather?
It is, yeah. I was just walking, I found it, did a little scream, woo! I found the jay feather! I've only got a small one. I put it in a nice little frame, it's yet to go on my wall.
I love how you framed it.
Yeah. So, for anyone who hasn't seen a jay feather, one side of it is black, the other side is really beautiful blue colour, and it's striped between like a bright blue and a black. It's very striking. If you were to see one, you would immediately think that is a jay feather. Obviously, you would need to know what it looks like, but take a look at some pictures. They're very beautiful, and I guess see if you can find one yourself. It's definitely a nature treasure in my opinion. And I'll put a photo of my framed jay feather on our social media, so everyone can take a look, see what a jay feather looks like, and also admire it in all its beauty. What about you, Keris?
So we seem to have a bit of a bird theme going on, and mine is also bird related. So I recently moved house, and as I was packing away all my things, I looked out of my window of my old flat, and I saw a green woodpecker just on the grass in front of me. It was amazing. I was just like, oh wow, this is a nice find. And I took a little video of it and sent it to my mum, because my mum loves birds, and I thought she'd like to see it. So yeah, that was my highlight.
My cup of tea has all gone.
Yeah.
Or your cup of water, Alicia.
Yeah.
Which must mean it's the end of the episode.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for chatting with us today about the amazing work you're doing. And we'll put Alicia's social media information in the description.
Thank you, Ruth. It's been fun.
And if anyone listening would like to listen to the poems that Alicia has written, Every Dune is a Mountain has an audiobook and also the physical book, so we'll share the link to this in the description as well. Next time, we will be joined by Will Pearce, a musician who creates songs about wildlife. Exciting stuff. Don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find the details in the description of this episode, and keep an eye out for our next episode with Will.
Thanks again, Alicia, for joining us today, and thank you for listening to Nature Positivity.